First of all, thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Evan Goldman from EYA. I've met most of you over my career here in Montgomery County. And I want to really, first of all, thank you for allowing me to speak and talk about these issues, but also to apologize for the confusion that this creates in the process. And I know it's not ideal to be coming in last minute with major zoning changes, not major, but some zoning requests on parcels in a master plan to you guys, to staff, or quite frankly to the community. And so I think most of you know the amount of community outreach I do as part of my life and how much I value that and care about it. And so that's not in any way a way to try to cut the community out. And I would imagine I'll be probably meeting with the community, 50 times over the next year to 2 years as we go through this process, because I think that's a critical part of the process. But I'll give you a little bit of background of how EYA got interested in this project. And for those of you who don't know EYA, we typically do townhomes near transportation, near transit. We've been doing that for 25 years. We're based in Bethesda. And we take a lot of pride in the fact that we do mixed income housing. So we typically have really nice affordable housing. We often replace affordable housing. And we also have really beautiful market rate housing, everything from the ultra high end, elevator townhomes to kind of, townhomes that millennials can afford. And we do that all around the metro area. We've done 46 projects in our corporate history. Lyttonsville is this interesting opportunity because it's rare that a transportation station opens and the densities are low enough to allow EYA to do something. Typically White Flint, Bethesda, Silver Spring, all the CBDs, Wheaton, the FARs are so high that you can't make townhomes work there. The land sellers wouldn't sell the property to someone to develop townhomes. But in Lyttonsville, because of the nature of the community there, the importance of being respectful of the residents that live in that neighborhood, townhomes actually start to work. So for us, that's really fantastic. I had been working on behalf of Federal Realty on the Rollingwood property, and so I met with the community a bunch over the past 2 years. And that's how I guess I knew Lyttonsville already because my kids go to Silver Stars, and I have a whole bunch of friends who live in that neighborhood. But that was how I got to meet some of the community representatives and understand the community even more depth. And so when I came over to EYA about 6 months ago, I started trying to figure out, is there any way that EYA could do something here near the Purple Line station? And so at this point, we have essentially what we're looking for here, and I'll walk through the zoning change request. What we're proposing is largely in keeping with what's already in the master plan. The total unit count that we would be right around where you are in the master plan. So this isn't an addition of 1,000 additional units. This is a reorganization of those units so that the higher density multifamily buildings can be closer to the transit. The affordable housing can be closer to the transit, which is where it wants to be, especially to encourage affordable renters to not have cars so that they can even reduce their cost of living. And then have the townhomes largely on the edges closer to the community as a buffer between the taller buildings. Given that our product is typically 3 to 4 stories, and even when we do rental buildings, here we couldn't imagine them being more than 5, 6 stories. The heights here also wouldn't be something that would largely upset the community, or quite frankly be different from what's already being proposed in any way. But the big difference that we are looking at is largely, I'll show with my arrow, the block right here, and that's WSSC and the 2 county parcels on the other side of the tracks. And the reason it's so critical to think about those is that this is a 20-year plan, and in order to have the multifamily concentrated near the transit stop and townhomes on the other parcels, there needs to be a place to receive those multifamily buildings. And so when you look at this map, what we would propose is everything in light blue being townhomes. And so you're taking, properties that are up against the Lyttonsville community, up against the park, in working with HOC, if we're able to come to an agreement with them. We're a joint venture partner with them elsewhere in the county. But the idea would be to have HOC's multifamily units closer to the transit and have townhomes on the Paddington Square site, which we think many members of the community will be pretty excited about. Same with Friendly Gardens, same with most of the WSSC site. And so you really get a tenting of density. You get single-family home ownership in the community, and you get the multifamily buildings closest to transit. Second to that, what you also get by doing that is the opportunity for a little bit of retail right at the metro station. This is not major. This is a few restaurants, a cafe, maybe a small grocery, not a grocery store, but like a market of some sort, but something that creates life within walking distance. So EYA's tagline for 20 years now is life within walking distance. So we judge ourselves. We actually won't do an acquisition unless it has that. And if we do an acquisition that we don't think has it, we add it. And so while we don't do a lot of retail, we do a little bit. And so in this case, you've got this wonderful park asset. You have an amazing transportation stop between two huge job centers. So people could literally live here and not drive during the week if they didn't want to. And the opportunity to add just enough retail that you feel like on a Saturday night when you want to go out for dinner, you don't have to get in your car. Or, you know, when you want to go out for lunch with your kids, you can go somewhere. And we think that type of retail, once we get out in the community and, you know, meet with even more people, there will be a hunger for something like that. We know how excited people care about the retail center on Grubb Road, and we think that there could be something similar here, but in a mixed-use building with residential above it. So the change is really requesting, Planning Board had recommended R20 on the WSSC site, which would allow for townhomes. So what we're talking about is largely consistent with that. We're showing kind of multifamily right up against Lyttonsville Place in the dark blue, and then in the light blue townhomes. And the only reason we went with CRT 1.5 versus R20 is that it allows for the types of setbacks and designs that we do in our projects much better than R20 does. And would create the type of environments we've created at Chelsea Heights and at Montgomery Row, and you know we've got 4 active projects in the county, so you know what we do. We then talked about the other side of the tracks, and we had a really cool meeting at the chamber just last week, and with some of the representatives of the community that have a really big interest in industrial. And so whether you've been following this or not, there's this really big movement in the development community to come up with a way for industrial and residential to coexist. And so this isn't the 1800s anymore, where we have, you know, industrial tenants that are huge polluters and we're creating toxic issues of residents being next to industrial. A lot of these industrial tenants are the lifeblood of the county. They're the people that create jobs. They're entrepreneurs. And quite frankly, it creates a place where people can actually, without college degrees, can actually make a living in pretty high-paying jobs. The Purple Line Station is going to make that even better because now you have people that can make a living and be near transit. But one of the negatives of the industrial area right now is that it's just not that walkable. And the tenants that are there, often people don't know they're there. And so how do you celebrate those tenants? How do you make sure that they're being marketed appropriately and that they have the partnership from the private sector to do the best they can from a business perspective, and then also create a really good synergy with the residential community across the tracks? And so I think initially we met with 4 or 5 tenants over there the other day, and I think by the nature of what's going on and nervousness, there was, there are walls up, people are concerned, and I think after they realized what our proposal is, there was some excitement. And so our thought is largely, to look at what's there today and come up with ways to beautify it, and then also to solve some of the problems that they have. So whether it's parking or it's loading or it's access, how do we solve that collectively? How do we create more pedestrian connectivity? So if the Creative Cakes wanted to have a storefront and allow people to actually come in on foot or come in by, and actually shop there in addition to what they make, that would be possible. For someone to drop their kid at the gymnastics place and actually sit at a cafe could be a nice amenity for the community. There's some really cool industrial projects going around the country. 2 of these examples in the upper right are from Miami and from Pittsburgh, where they actually have created these muralistic art programs on industrial buildings just to beautify what's there. And so that's something where it could be an opportunity to celebrate historic Lyttonsville, to work with the local high schools and some of the local arts programs to do public art on the buildings. And these are not expensive public benefits. These are things you get a huge bang for the buck. And also bring from a public relations perspective, bring people to these tenants and help their business as well. Striping bike lanes in the streets, adding some street trees in here and there, but making sure there's still room for trucks to move. There's a lot of ways we can make this work and not scare away the tenants, and then and in fact help invigorate them. And then on top of that, the middle image here is from Baltimore. This is OpenWorks, and so I don't know if you've heard of this, but it was a state and city funded co-work space essentially for industrial type tenants. And so, one of the if you look at this parcel here where, that's being taken to build a Purple Line station, you could imagine a 2-story building there one day with a co-work space, sharing of equipment, and on the first floor, maybe there's a coffee shop and a cafe and there's access to the Purple Line, so we're improving people's ability to get to the train. And then that also could help feed workers and employees into some of the industrial tenants that are in that neighborhood. So one of their issues is finding qualified people to work there, the people that don't have PhDs and don't work at NIH. How do you find them? How do you find them and train them? These types of places in partnership with the county could really start to create that. And then what I think that helps is you have a residential community, you have this built-in base of potential people that might want to go there and be part of it, that go there today, quite frankly, to shop, or to, to do what they need to do and take care of their services. By connecting them and celebrating that, I think it could be a really cool model around the country. And unlike a lot of the places where this is happening, this would actually be authentic. So, I can't tell you how many developers in Portland and in Brooklyn and even JBG, what they're doing downtown, which is really cool in Eckington, are building new buildings and then trying to create this in the base, right? And here you have the opportunity where it's actually existing. Let's figure out how to make that work collectively for everyone's greater good. We heard the other day, there are distilleries looking for space, there's breweries, so it could be this mix where you have the ability to actually have these great tenants and makers doing things in the county and bringing pride to the county, and then at the same time, being able to do the work they need to do in that community. Architecturally, this is so early. These boards were something we shared with the community, but it's not in any way, shape, or form what, who knows if we would propose this, but the concept is you could have some of the residential in this area have that warehouse-type feel, where it blends between the residential neighborhood. You have some townhome projects in this image that are actually warehouse style, as well as some multifamily. All of these are relatively low-scale buildings. The Brookland building, if you've ever been on the Metro going past Rhode Island Metro, you kind of see that Brookland sign has become one of the kind of key buildings in that neighborhood. So we think architecturally there might be a way to blend this as well and to celebrate it in the multifamily. And what the main point here is, who knows if EYA will be able to tie up all this property. We're talking to a whole bunch of the property owners at this point. We're pretty far along with 4 or 5 of them. And maybe that's all we get. But the fear we had was to preclude for the next 15, 20 years something happening on the WSSC or these county parcels. It seemed like it was a missed opportunity. It's right at the transit. The density levels we're talking about are relatively low and in keeping with what you're recommending on the other properties. And we think that the unit counts would ultimately end up approximately where you are. You already assumed 1,200 square feet on average per unit, which is pretty high. And so that's just what you would assume. If multifamily average is 800 and our townhomes are kind of in the 14 to 2,000, you're going to end up right around that 1,200 square feet per average, which is about what this is. So that's where we're at. We know it's very early on, and we apologize for coming so late to the table with all of you, but we will do whatever we need to do out in the community over the next 6 months before this is up at council to help educate people. Yeah, in the next 2 weeks too.
2 weeks?
Yeah.
You don't have 6 weeks?
So, but thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
You're allowed to do commercial, like restaurants in an IM zone. So except for the residential, you can do the restaurant uses right now, right? In the area that's shown as D north of, what's that street? Forest.
Yeah, you can. Under IM, you can.
Okay.
We would
Lyttonsville place, right?
Yeah, so one thing there's a person we're working with from this company, Recast City. We would want to put a program in place to make sure that we're preserving existing tenants. So, the fear here would be all of a sudden you have 1 restaurant, then 2, then 3, then 10, 20, and all of a sudden it's this restaurant district and you lose the tenant base. So there are programs that Alana, this woman from Recast, has been working on with Cincinnati and in various parts of the country where you figure out ways to preserve tenants. And it could be even that maybe a public benefit is helping preserve rents or keep rents low for some of the existing tenants that are there today. And that's why we see the retail really being on the WSSC side, so that you're not going impinging into that area. The county parcels, these 2 D parcels here, because you're going to have the the MTA maintenance shed there, if that didn't happen, it didn't happen, but that's a great opportunity to do a mixed income building above it to hide what would be a pretty unattractive site if that didn't get redeveloped. And maybe that could have a little bit of retail right there at the Purple Line entrance. So between that and Parcel C, you could get enough walkable retail for the community to have something to go to, but then also respect, the tenants that are there today. Now there are, there's a cannoli place and there's a cake place, and there are some cool tenants there that have food service, and that's great. As long as they're makers and it's industrial and they also have that interchange with the community, that's awesome. But it would be, I think the goal would be to not lose tenants that are there and really work with the community closely to make sure they stay.
When is that something that we have done before, having that effort of retaining businesses as a public benefit?
Well, there is actually a provision in the CR zone that I think allows us to consider that. And there is an extensive section now in the Lyttonsville plan about supporting and retaining existing businesses. That is a priority in the plan. But one point that I wanted to get clarification on, and I think it's an interesting point that Mr. Goldman has brought up, is there are several properties in the Brookville Road area that are either currently government-owned or will, I think they are government-owned because they were bought for the Purple Line.
Right.
And my understanding, and this is what I just wanted clarification on, is the ones that you're talking about actually rezoning from IM to something else are ones that currently do not have businesses
Right.
on the property, that are owned by the government,
Right.
that when the Purple Line is done, will be, in some cases, like the one that had, the upper D, the one that is there. It was a private business, it was bought by MTA, it is now a vacant building.
Right.
And when the Purple Line is finished, it will probably be declared surplus and sold by MTA. So if that was rezoned, again, I'm just making sure I'm hearing this correctly. If that was rezoned, you're not displacing anyone because right now it's vacant and it's owned by the government. But it would be an opportunity to introduce some of these kinds of interesting uses that you just described. Is that correct?
Yeah, it is. So the one change would be that from this outline that you're seeing to our letter is that we're only requesting the zoning change on the parcels to the south of Lyttonsville Place. And when we met with some of the tenants and with the chamber and some of the civic activists that have been working to organize these tenants really effectively, there was a concern that this parcel would be so close to the industrial tenants that it could create a hazard where you have residential right there next to them, and thus those residents are complaining. So we agreed to not try to pursue a CR zone there because under IM, you could do a restaurant, the cafe, the maker space, the other type of cool uses that would make that really interesting for the county without having to do residential on that parcel, and really keep the residential a little bit further away on these parcels and on the WSSC site.
So that's great. So you're clarifying that the only rezoning that you are proposing at this point is the C site and the lower D site,
Exactly.
the site, the Lyttonsville Place, and whether that's south or west, whatever.
Yeah, I
the
think it's
direction.
southwest. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so there it is. The whole point of that was so that's all open and public, and